Assalamu alaikum, peace be with you and welcome to Islam and Life with me, Tariq Ramadan, broadcasting from London. In today's show we ask the question, have the Mayor of London comments gone too far?
A recent newspaper article by the Mayor of London, Boris Johnson, argued that Muslim children who are being taught crazy stuff leading to their radicalization should be considered victims of child abuse and promptly taken away from their families and put into care. A controversy has ensued surrounding the alleged role of Muslim parents in breeding terrorism. A swift response by the Muslim Council of Britain has highlighted that the people responsible of the murder of Lee Rigby were not sons of radical extremists, nor were those who committed previous atrocities. Writer Arun Kundanani observes that since 2005, an elaborate system of surveillance has been created that draws social workers, teachers and youth workers into spying on Muslim children for supposed signs of radicalization. This week on Islam and Life, we ask, have the Mayor of London's comments just gone too far?
That's a good question to ask. It's not the first time that we hear the Mayor of London, Boris Johnson, things that are quite worrying or at least questionable about Islam and Muslims. Now he's saying that what we are witnessing, the whole radicalization process, what we have been talking about in the UK for years since 7/7, now the responsibility is to the parents, and we have to take their children away, in fact, to educate them in the right way with British values and less Islamic reference. This understanding is problematic because the consequences of that are tremendous in the way people are understanding Islam, in the relationship between Muslims and their fellow citizens in the country. And not only we heard the former Prime Minister Tony Blair saying the rules of the game are changing, but it's not only the rules that are changing, the atmosphere, the whole understanding of the Muslim presence, and this understanding of the blame should be put on the parents and not understanding the reasons, the consequences. And as we are all against violence, it's quite important to understand the reasons, the causes, and the surrounding and the atmosphere. So these are questions that we have to ask and try to tackle the issue. And to answer the question, I'm joined by my guest, Dr. Muhammad Abdul Bari, former Secretary General of the Muslim Council of Britain. Thank you so much for being with us today. You have been involved, in fact, very much at the grassroots level as someone who was the General Secretary General of the Muslim Council of Britain. So you have been also in touch with the authority in this country at many levels. Now we have a statement and that is quite problematic as to its substance and the consequence. Let's come to the substance. Why do you think Boris Johnson said that, and what is exactly what he meant by saying that this connection between radicalization and the parents and what is taught to the Muslim children?
Well, I don't know why he wrote that. That's probably an ill-conceived idea, and he writes his blog articles as a private person, but he is a mayor of London. London has 1 out of 7 people of London are Muslims, and over 1/3 of Londoners are of ethnic minority community, and the implication is really dire. But I wouldn't personalize this because the environment has been so toxic recently, especially after Daily Mail's article on Sheikh Haitham al-Haddad. He has written, I don't know whether it was on the spur of the moment or whether it was ill-conceived or it was deliberate. So without going into his intention, which he knows only, I think the consequences is really negative for the Muslim community, and not only for the Muslim communities, for the community cohesion.
So before coming to the consequences of that, what you are saying is that what he said is part of something which is an overall atmosphere, which is very negative towards Muslims and towards some of the leaders and some of the presence of Muslims now. So it's 10 years after what happened in this country, almost 10 years now, and it's exactly the same in the States. Just after September 11, what we had is support from the people, and 10 years later we had new controversies, and the atmosphere was more negative 10 years later than it was just after what happened in the States. We come now in the UK, and we have, as you are saying, newspapers, the coverage about Muslims and the Muslim presence in the country. It's making it even more negative. We had support by people just after 7/7, and now we can see that it's normalized. How do you understand this? What is happening in this country, which is also happening in other countries, but Britain was protected from that? At least from outside, this is the perception that in Britain it was easier to be a Muslim. Now it's as if something is changing. How do you explain this?
Well, I think it is easier for us to be Muslims in this country. So I wouldn't
it's still the case. Yeah.
I will not say anything against that, because it's a reality compared to many Muslim countries. But the situation is, after the 7/7, sections of the right-wing media and neocon think tanks came vehemently against Muslim community and trying to prove that the Muslim community are not fit for civilized manner as given by the democratic or liberal society, and they are of other. And that has probably got stuck in right-wing media and sections of the right-wing politicians. But the sad thing is, a mainstream politician who is very smart and clever politician like Boris Johnson coming up with this writing is a real worry for us, because we know what the right-wing media can do. They have certain limitations, but if it becomes mainstream from mainstream politicians, this issue can become mainstream. And in fact, over the years, what is happening, and it started after 7/7. I was the head of MCB from 2006 to 2010, and we have seen the Prevent agenda by Tony Blair, and the Prevent agenda at the time, in his period, in his government, Prevent agenda was about linking of community cohesion and security. Muslims were seen as the security threat. We protested, mainstream community protested, and at the end of the day, Gordon Brown's government had a review on Prevent agenda, and the review found that the way Prevent was run, conflating security and community cohesion, was counterproductive. We thought that was a good start. But what happened with this current government, coalition government, they had another review without involving anyone from the Muslim community, as far as I know. And they have brought another idea, and that idea probably was thrown by the neocon think tanks and some extremists from the Muslim community, that Muslim communities should be divided into radicals, extremists, non-violent extremists, violent extremists, and terrorists. And the sad thing is, this conveyor belt theory says, or in effect implies, that starting from radicalization, there is a linear process of someone becoming extremist, violent extremist, and terrorist, which doesn't have any evidence by anyone. And even CIA's senior officials were saying that it is not a linear process. Radicalization can happen in any way. It can happen through online internet and other ways. And one doesn't have to end up in terrorist starting being radicalized. Because at the end of the day, Western education system and British education system, which is unique, it talks about radicalized ideas, and it promotes radical thinking. And how could this radical thinking turn into non-violent and violent extremists or even terrorism? Through this process, what happened, the current government has stopped formally talking with mainstream Muslim organizations like Muslim Council of Britain and FOSIS, Federation of Students Islamic Societies. And because they were advised that these organizations are non-violent extremists. So the problem is very, very deep. And as a result, what is happening, the Muslim community in effect has been treated as a suspect community. And this word is being used by academics, and the suspect community was there in the history. The Jews were suspect community at a certain period of history, European history, and the Irish community, Republican community was suspect community, and now Muslims are treated as suspect community.
But this is exactly the point. The statements coming from somebody who whatever. It could be a private, and you are right, we don't have to personalize the whole thing. It's within the atmosphere and within a movement which is normalizing such statements everywhere. It's in North America, in Canada, or in the United States of America. It's in Europe, it's in Australia. We can see this. Now, on the left-hand side of the political spectrum or the right-hand side, we can see that some people are playing exactly the same game, and there is a kind of populism and playing with this. Muslims are a potential threat, and the Muslim community, this is why we find the suspects, and there is mistrust. And as you were saying, what we are facing now is a lack of dialogue between the Muslim leadership and on the one side and the governments. It's as if they also are suspected, maybe non-violent extremists and supporting trends. Now, these are very important. These have an impact on anything which has to do with our relationship with our fellow citizens. So my question here, the impact, can you feel it on the ground between, for example, the Muslim Council of Britain and other institutions? Is there something that we can say, in fact, it works? Because if I go to the States or I go to other countries in Europe, while it might be more difficult for them to live as Muslims there, they are saying, yes, it has an impact. We feel that there is a lack of trust, and this living together is at risk in the society. Is it at risk in the UK?
Well, in the street level, as far as I know, things are normal. Even local police work with the local community. This is really great. What happens, this deep feed of suspicion that is really increasing, that is a danger. And in effect, that is chipping away confidence from young Muslims. And because if you are seen as always a suspect, then your confidence go down, and either you want to prove that you are not suspect, or you don't bother about this. So in a way, the social activism in the Muslim community, which may be political or social or cultural or charity or different areas, that could be hampered. But on the other hand, what's happening in the wider society, this suspicion is getting ingrained, and nearly 30% of British people think that Muslims are fearful, and the proportion may go up. And if it goes up, then that may impact in the street level and ordinary level. We hope it doesn't happen. So the fact is, it is happening. The politicians and the thinkers, they should really step back for a while and see that there are sections of the community. Muslims are sections of this wider society, and in London, as I said, is 1 out of 7. And we cannot simply rule this community away. And there are all sorts of professionals within our community. There are young people who are overwhelmingly now politically and socially conscious. We are really an asset for this country.
You are right, but at the same time, if you go towards real politics, what you can see is that some of the parties, for example, the UKIP here in Britain, or for example, le Front National in France, or the Get-Wilders in the Netherlands, everywhere in Europe. In fact, these statements that are shedding suspicion on the Muslim presence and Muslims, and even the Muslim values, because what Boris Johnson is saying, something which is deep, is that what they are taught, so meaning there is something in the Islamic values that can be problematic with our values. So once again, it's us versus them, the Muslims being the others. So this rhetoric is helping parties to gain ground and to win elections. So now my question to you, because you are a leader within the Muslim community in the UK, what should be the answer, the response coming from the leadership? Because what I heard at the grassroots level is that are saying, you, the leadership, you are not tough enough. You want too much dialogue and you are not confronting the government. On the other side, some others are saying, no, we need to go for dialogue. We need to go to a kind of institutionalized presence and try to find ways. So what should be the response?
Well, dialogue or working together is part of the game, because we are part of the society. Why should we stop dialogue? Why should we have dialogue? We should have dialogue. What we expected from mainstream politicians is not articles like this. If this article comes, or a talk comes from someone in UKIP or any other right groups, that's expected more or less in the current situation. We expect our mainstream politicians, very senior politicians, to defend the community. And
so would you say, for example, that he went too far? And if yes, what should be the answer of the Muslim community?
Well, in everybody's opinion, he has gone too far, because the comment that he has made is, one is ill-conceived, the other thing is not implementable. Well, how do you monitor, say, hundreds of thousands of Muslim parents? And as Muslim Council of Britain rightly said, the two murderers of Lee Rigby, their parents were Christians. And so is there any way of monitoring? I have been a teacher all my life, and so I know about social service. Social service is overburdened, they are under-resourced. How would they monitor which parent is saying what and which parent is radicalizing? In fact, if it is radicalization, the university should be charged with radicalization, because university radicalize their students, because that's the part of their creating future generations. So it is unimplementable, and it is ill-conceived, so it's not helping us. What we are saying that let's talk on this, and there's no harm in talking. If there are formal, informal talkings, then we can come up and give arguments, counter-arguments. We are not saying that the Muslim community is free from any problem. There are a lot of bad apples sitting us. Like any other community, we had bad apples or even rotten apples. But that doesn't mean that the whole community should be treated like that, as a suspect community. And parents and others should be incriminated that they are radicalizing their own children.
But what you are saying is that you acknowledge the fact that within the Muslim community, the British Muslim community, we have people who can indulge into violent activities and sometimes radical views, even not being the mainstream Islamic position, even against the mainstream, in the way they deal with civilians, in the way they deal with innocent people, in the way they deal with non-Muslims. So you acknowledge this, and this was done from the very beginning. Now, when you have people who sometimes are promoting these ideas, what I heard from many institutions and many governments is you Muslims, and especially the leadership, are not doing enough to prevent this from happening. So in fact, because you don't do the job, it's for the government to monitor the Muslims and to make it clear for the parents, we are not going to let you do this. So what is your answer to that?
That's not true. Muslim organizations have said all along, we have since 9/11 and 7/7, I have been part of the sort of MCB's leadership. And every incident that came out from the Muslim community by someone or other, violent or anything, we condemned, and Muslim community condemns. We have to remember that Muslim community organizations are not a state. We have all resources, we all are volunteers. Whatever we could do, we do. But the thing is working together. And there are people in all other communities, say gunfight and grooming and all sorts of negative social issues. It's not related to only Muslim community. And there are other issues that other communities are involved. So why do we have to just pinpoint one community for certain actions by a few individuals, which is condemned by each and every one of the Muslim community, as far as I know, any sensible, apart from some radical one or two groups. This Muslim community.
But is it not, that's a very important point, is it not the time or high time for the Muslim citizens and the Muslim leadership and for people who are involved in the British society to come with other leaders, other activists, and now to be much more assertive by saying to people like the mayor in some of his statements, that's not acceptable. You are yourself becoming a danger for the social cohesion we are talking about, because by doing this, the atmosphere that you are spreading might help you to win the next election, but they are not helping to educate the next generation. Don't we have to be more assertive and sometimes confront such ideas by saying, that's not acceptable, we won't accept this anymore, because at the end it's dangerous not only for Muslims but for all of us?
It's a very good point, and to some extent it's done, but it's not that effective because Muslim organizations are not well resourced. We don't have any media, PR and staff. I know about Muslim Council of Britain. It's a very big organization in terms of its name, but it has only a few staff, and there is financial issues. So there is a constraint of resource, And our community is normally deprived community. They like building mosques. And, but when it comes to social, political understanding and more challenging the issues, we are yet to learn some of the techniques. But yes, you are right that we should work with wider society, civil society organizations and other individuals. And in fact, good thing is many have come and more or less criticized the current state of anti-Islamic rhetoric. So we should work with them, and so that there is a collective, sort of collective momentum of creating an understanding and challenging the negative media profiles about Muslim community. But it needs time, it needs resource, and it's not easy at the moment with the resources of the Muslim organizations.
Thank you for that. I think that listening to you and what you were saying at the beginning, it's important. The point that you made at the beginning, which is we have to be very cautious not to personalize some of the statements, but to understand the whole atmosphere and the political dynamics, because it's coming from the left, it's coming from the right, and sometimes this is the way you gain voters, and you can attract some of the citizens to vote for you. Now, what is important in what you are saying is that to look at the reality and to confront, the statements with facts and figures, and to show what has been done within the Muslim community. And you were referring to the work that has been done by the Muslim Council of Britain at the grassroots level in institution, and to keep on this dialogue. It's very important to have this institutionalized dialogue, even though sometimes with some governments it's difficult. And the last point, which is important, yes, there are, things should be done, but we need more resources. And it might be also important for the Muslim citizens to understand that they have to put more resources in such activities, which is the wider society, people who are not Muslims, but they are sharing the principles, because at the end this is threatening not only the living within the Muslim community, but the living together within the wider British society. Well, that's all we have time for. Please let us know your thoughts and views on any of the shows you have seen. And here is the way to contact us.
We at Islam and Life would like to hear your views about the subjects that we discuss. We would also love to hear your suggestions for our program, so get in touch with us. You can also share your thoughts with other Islam and Life fans, engage in debate, and find out how to watch our previous shows. Follow us on Twitter at Islam and Life TV, or join us on Facebook by liking our page Islam and Life on Press TV.
Finally, I would like to thank my guest, Dr. Muhammad Abdul Bari. Thank you so much for being with us and your insight. And I hope to see you next week, inshallah.